You are listening to SPN, the Sports Podcasting Network. The Five Rings Podcast, your weekly amateur sports and Olympic sports show with Duane, Rollins, and Kevin Laramee. And now, without further ado, here's Duane Rollins.
Weekly?
I guess weeks have become a lot longer than before.
Yeah. Look, we took a bit of a break after the summer games. We did one post show, and then sort of through launching the rest of the network and just some work changes and things like that, it became hard. But this is my favorite show to do, and I love talking about Olympic sports and Olympics. So we're all happy to be back, and we're less than a year from Pyeongchang, and all is good. So we're back to the Five Rings Podcast. Kevin Laramee, Montreal. I'm Duane Rollins in Toronto. If you're listening to this for the first time, there's a rich archive out there, and a lot of the themes that we might talk about today have been talked about in the past. We're going to talk about bids. We're going to talk about world championships in Olympic disciplines. We'll talk about things if that's what we do on this show, Kevin. But obviously, we talk every day, so it's weird for me to say how are you doing, how have you been doing the break?
How have you been,
Kevin and I? But
how have you been since the last 30 minutes that I talked to you? No, but
what have you doing in the last half hour?
Exactly, Montreal is now champion of Canada. The Montreal Canadiens in the CWHL Women's Hockey, the Women's Hockey League of Canada. They have won the Clarkson Cup, so congratulations to the Montreal Canadiens.
There you go, Canadiens winning a championship. That doesn't happen very often anymore.
No, and guess who scored the game-winning goal? Guess who scored?
Who was it?
Come on, Marie-Philippe Poulin. Who else?
Haley Wexner?
No, she was retired.
Yeah, she did retire. Retired the same day of a couple Canadian soccer players too. We talked about it on our other shows. So that was an iconic female sporting hero that stepped away since we last spoke. So a lot has happened in the world. We can't catch it all today. The one thing I get confused by with that women's league is the fact that there's the American League too, and they're both very small, and I've just never been able to quite figure out why they don't just work together and have one league that is in North America. Like
we should give each other the number.
Most other sports,
we should give the NWHL and the CHL. You know what? I know somebody I want you to meet. How about you guys get together? How about you make it a better league? And you know what? There's American teams in the CWHL too, so that's the funny part.
Yeah, it doesn't make a lot of sense, and I'm sure there's some battle lines that are being drawn here. It's important for the women's hockey community to get along, I think, because it's just not big enough yet. If they want to grow that sport, I don't know, two doesn't make a lot of sense, as we said. We've talked about that before too. But congratulations to Montreal and to the hardworking women of that team for that title. That's it's not no one's getting rich doing that, so they're making a little money, which is good. We're glad about that, but by and large, that's still for the love of the game type thing, right?
Yep.
All right. Speaking of the love of the game and staying late into the career, Eric Guay, he is a world champion at 35 years old, the oldest world champion in alpine skiing in history. That's a Canadian story there. There's a rich tradition of the speed events for the Canadians going back into the 80s when the crazy Canucks sort of burst onto the scene. But we were having a debate off air of whether Guay might be considered the best skier of all time just for his longevity in Canada, longevity, and now world title. I don't know. Thoughts on that, Kevin?
Well, just to talk about the race itself, 2 weeks before the Super G World Championship that actually was held on February 8th, 2 weeks before, he had a nasty crash where his air jacket, they're actually wearing airbags now to prevent injuries, and he would have been badly injured if it wasn't for the airbag vest that now skiers are wearing in World Cup. Well, this was in World Championship, so on the tour. And that nasty crash left him bruised, but because of the air vest, he wasn't injured, so he could continue and train. And he took it was a little stiff for a few days, like you mentioned, but he was able to enjoy. And he told himself the morning of February 8th, where he won the Super G World Championship, that, you know what? forget about everything and just go for it. 35 years old, a sport that you need to take a lot of risk, but we talk a lot often, Duane, about the knowledge in sport, and there's one point in a career's in an athlete's career where the amount of knowledge, the peak of knowledge is at its highest, and the peak of athleticism just before it goes down, and that's your prime of your career. It doesn't matter what age, it really depends of how you train how you catch your body and all that. But the more knowledge you do get, the smarter training you do, you're actually better in competition. In the world of skiing, it's hundredth of a second, able to shave hundredth of a second here and there because of experience, because of knowing how to just put your little pinky toe in outside of out. I'm exaggerating, but that small margin in that level. And for Eric Guay, the amount of experience and recovery, he had some injuries over the last few years, and now back to the skiers are never 100%, but closest thing to 100% that you can be at 35 years old. World champion in the Super G, a very tough and long discipline. It's very impressive, but thank God for those air vests, because if it wasn't for those, well, he might not even be walking today, never mind being the world champion.
No, precisely. And those kind of safety initiatives are well needed and understood that they have to be there. I mean, it's a sport where it's one of the few sports out there where a worst case scenario is death, right? Their skiers have died before because they've hit the wrong thing. Certainly, it's not something anyone wants to see, and it's nice that they're doing things like that. With Guay, you look at some of the advantages that he's had compared to the past generation before him. He's grown up in the sport basically during an entire decade where the funding program was there, the road to the podium.
Not just that, Red Bull as well. He's a Red Bull athlete for a few years, and Red Bull has generated a lot of revenue and money for the top tier athletes in the quote unquote action sports or sports like skiing, which he has been a beneficiary over the last few years.
Yeah, precisely. They're just able to financially last a little bit longer. On the Podium was the program that I was trying to get out of my head a minute ago. Just sort of advantages there. And you look at sports science and things like that, you see older athletes across the board, but still this is a remarkable story. And it's symbolically for him, I'm sure he's aware that it was exactly 1 day or 1 year when he won the World Championship. It was exactly 1 year away from the Winter Olympics. So at 35, if he had any thoughts of retiring, he might be thinking differently to get one more Olympics in now. And 36 would be a remarkable story, but he'll be going in as the defending world champion. Another podium there, that as well. The other athlete that won a world title in a sport that's not really necessarily Canada's strength, it was in cross-country skiing.
Yep.
I think that was a neat story too, of the 50K.
Harvey, which is this is the king stage. This is the biggest race in the world of cross-country skiing, the 50-kilometer freestyle, which is basically a mass start. You start all together, 50-kilometer, and the first guy to cross the line wins the race. It's that easy. It's that understandable, but it's a lot of tactics as well. And he had the best skis on the day and was able to go at the right time and launch his attack once he got to the stadium, surprising all the favorites. He wasn't like a clear favorite. It was a contender, and he has been having a tough season the last few weeks, but still, we all know he has a leg. And the athlete from Saint-Féréol-les-Neiges, imagine how prophetic it is when, first of all, your father was a legend in the world of cross-country skiing, so is your mother, and you're born in a place that's called Saint-Féréol-les-Neiges, which means snow. This was and is meant to be. But Alex Harvey, with the race of his life, 50-kilometer world champion, born in 1988, Duane, but quite an achievement for Alex Harvey. We all knew he had the talent. We all knew he had the potential and the ability, but he always had trouble over the last. He's been better over the last year, but before, I think we've talked about this on the Five Rings 2 years ago, he had trouble with his arteries and veins in his legs when he was actually getting to a certain amount of exertion, a certain amount of tiredness for his muscle. His arteries would not work properly, not feed his muscle properly. He would not be able to continue and sustain an effort. And in an endurance sport like cross-country skiing, the ability to sustain an effort is literally necessary. If not, if you don't have it, you're not even going to finish the damn race. So with that being corrected, they took multiple surgeries and multiple questioning and MRIs to figure out how to do. But after 2 surgeries to correct the situation, Alex Harvey for the last year and a half has been back to probably the best of his potential. And in a sport where you get better with age, we just talked about the world champion at 35 for Eric Guay. In this sport, we've seen Norwegian, we've seen Finnish athletes late in their 30s being successful because knowledge and experience is very important to succeed. But Alex Harvey, at a very young age of 28 years old, no, it's very young, but still young in this sport, he got the race of his life. Everything was perfectly, and it's a long journey for him. Can you imagine when nobody, the doctors were not able to figure out what was wrong with him? Why his muscles would literally just shut down eventually because they couldn't get the nourishment necessary during a long sustained effort.
That's a remarkable comeback. And you think about his father, and I'm old enough to remember his father being, finishing 40th place in the Olympics type thing. And let's not be disparaging when I say that, because he really had no support at home, right? He was a one-man team. He would always get the profile in the Canadian Olympics, or once every 4 years. You'd learn about him, and they'd do the little profiles on him, and then he'd go out and he'd finish to the best of his abilities based on the training and the resources he was given at that time. But
which was nothing. Basically, they were giving him just like, we're not going to bother you when you train. That's all.
Yeah, they might give a plane ticket to the World Championships type thing. Like, there was very little support, and this is just night and day difference. It's, again, not a sport that has a great tradition in this country because, we just touched on it, just no one did it. And now, with some success, we've seen some Olympic gold medals on the female side. Certainly, if this breakout can happen in a year's time in the 50K, which, as you say, that's the ending event of every Winter Olympics. So that would be nice to go out. And I do recall he was 4th or 5th, I believe, in Sochi. So he's had a bit of a good run there as well. So we'll see what he looks like in a year. It's a fun event to watch. Those mass starts, I love watching mass start cross country skiing.
But this is his second gold medal at that level. He has one in 2011 with Devon Kershaw, the sprint in the World Championship. This time around, it's his first individual gold medal. So it's very impressive. And slowly but surely, his trophy case is getting bigger and bigger. And for a sport that, yes, Canada's cold. Yes, we're usually good in winter sport, but this one has been dominated for decades, if not centuries, by Austria, Norway, and Nordic countries. And it's kind of fun to see Canada slowly creating a tradition in that sport.
Yeah, exactly. And it'll be take a high profile for sure when we hit a year's time on the TV screens here with there, because the cross country is a massive event in most of the world and hasn't got the attention in North America that maybe it deserves. And this will help when you have, probably go in as one of the favorites now, having been the defending world championship. Gay, it's crapshoot when you're talking about alpine skiing. You can finish first.
Well, cross country skiing, especially Duane in the mass start, you can start and somebody step on your damn ski and you just lose a minute. Anything can happen, especially in the freestyle, because you're trying to go faster, you skate, whatever the case may be, you have different it's freestyle, so it's literally every man for himself. And you do have tactics where you're trying to rope a dope, you not necessarily go all out, you hang around as a pack, nobody push himself too much, everybody's going to follow somebody, so when somebody's going to go full clip, then maybe he's going to have the advantage. There's a lot of give and take and a lot of gamesmanship in a race like the 50K. And for Alex Harvey to have the respect of his peers, to be literally allowed, not being poked, or because it's been seen before, you just push opponents. That's what can happen in a mass start. And Alex Harvey was able, for the first time in his career, to literally be the best at everything on that day.
Yeah, it's most of the tactics are almost similar to cycling when you think about it.
It's the exact same. The only difference is the speed and the mode of transportation, but it's the exact same mentality behind it. Look, it's a point-to-point type of race, right? So there's only so many different ways you can do a point-to-point race. Doesn't matter if you run, you ski, you go in a car, or you're doing on a bicycle. If you go all out, eventually you're either going to run out of gas before the other guys, or you go too fast and you crash. So there's only so much you could do. You can't push the envelope all the time. So it's that aspect. It's a point-to-point race. You have tactics, and there's a lot of drop-off. And I'm actually almost at a loss of word, because it was unexpected too. There's always a chance, like you mentioned. It's almost a crapshoot because, well, they're all starting together. Who knows what can happen? But Alex Harvey this time around, it almost doesn't sink in. We saw the news, we saw the highlights and the headlines, like, wow. But the immensity of that achievement in the world of cross country, it's the biggest story in that sport this year.
Fair enough. All right. On that note, let's take a quick little break. We're going to come back and we're going to discuss the summer games that nobody wants.
You are listening to SPN Radio, powered by the Sports Podcasting Network. Visit sportspodcastingnetwork.com for more.
And then there were two.
You mentioned the game no one wants. My question is, are those the game that Donald wants?
There's anytime you're talking about anything in America right now, you have to bring up him because it's relevant. The two bids left in for the 2024 Olympics are, of course, Los Angeles bidding for its third games and Paris also bidding for their third game. So that will be a bit of history there, whoever wins the right. But with the Trump administration's policies regarding travel, basically.
Immigration policies, yeah.
Yeah, there's some concern that, there's multiple examples of people that come from the countries that are banned. Not banned. I don't want to make this political too much, but they're allegedly banned, whatever. You want to put that there, so I don't want to pee off anyone who supports them. But being turned away already. So this is obviously a problem when you're trying to host an international competition of the highest regard. And I'm sure that...
Example, Duane, very close. That hits close to home for me. Sorry to interject here, but there was an athlete from Concordia that has a Canadian passport just because his name is a little bit Muslim-like, was denied entry for competition in Vermont. So it can happen in the sports world. We already have seen example of it happening across the board. We're talking about teams, a women's team from outside coming in, got rejected at the border a few days ago. So no, we've seen it happen.
Yeah, and this is probably for something like the Olympics. I'm sure that you will have a situation where, if in fact they do support this bid, the administration that is, where they come out and say that all athletes that are traveling with an Olympic team will probably be allowed. Like, I'm sure that they'll make those kind of promises, but you still have to win a vote, and the policy is very controversial, to say the least, around the world, and it's much more controversial outside of the United States borders, I think, than... Well, it's not controversial, it's just outright despised outside the American borders for the most part, right? So that's going to make it very difficult for the U.S. to gain the support it needs to win this vote. I guess especially when the city they're competing with is Paris, which obviously has a lot of intrinsic advantages anyway, that is just going to play out. And look, Paris is no stranger to terrorism, as we well know, unfortunately. So there is absolutely going to be some risks associated with holding any kind of big event there. But we also saw the Euros this summer go off without a hitch and proved that there's not necessarily any...
Duane, the without a hitch aspect is not necessarily true. Remember the attack at Paris and the viewing in the Euro with the truck. So there were some incidents. But majority were came out of it there was not enough incident to... It's hard. I don't know how to say it, but there was some incidents, but not enough to deter somebody of hosting the Olympics.
Yeah, and look, there's inherent risk to these things, and it's an unfortunate reality of the society that we currently live in. There's danger walking across the street too, though. So I think maybe you can't live your life concerned about that stuff, but. I've always felt that Paris would have the advantage on this, and the only advantage really that LA kind of has is it's been a very long time since it's been in North America, the Summer Games. It's been since Atlanta. It's been long enough has passed since the Atlanta Games that I think some of the bad taste of those games has sort of left people's minds, and they only remember sort of the athletes now, which is good. But there's maybe some momentum there for another American or North American bid, but the overall problem that it's illustrating, and this is the Summer Games. We could understand when we saw the bid that ultimately led to the last Winter Games being awarded. Beijing is that you really have to be incredibly wealthy and with almost like, this is a different in the sense of both the United States and France are obviously democratic countries, but it's almost to the point where it's, Beijing of the world are going to win all these bids because who wants to pay it? We're just seeing more and more cities drop out of this race one by one in this case. Same thing that happened with the 2026 bids for the winter games. And again, with the winter, you understand it because it's more difficult. You have to have a mountain involved. But it's weird that it's happening on the summer side. And the IOC really needs to take a long, hard look in the mirror and figure out how to fix this because it's not getting any better. And what's going to happen for the next bid after this? Like, who's going to bid for 30?
But let's go. We have hindsight now, so let's go back to the last few Olympics. Where was it? What happened? Rio, Sochi, London went off with no controversies, no itch. It was perfect. But since then, every time we're talking about Olympics, we're either talking about human rights not being respected in the host country, people getting killed and displaced to make place for Olympics. And let's not start talking about the Rio and favelas police, the pacification project, the whole fiasco, the millions of people's lives that were affected by this. The last years of Olympic coverage have been mostly negative. I don't blame politicians and especially citizens of those places that all they hear about talk about the Olympics, it's always controversy, it's always something negative, always something with a dark cloud heading above their head. If it was more positive, it would be easier to convince. And, we talk about the game no one wants. There was a lot more than 2 bids, but even for the winter games, there was a lot of places where I'm sorry, I can't speak English tonight. There were a lot of places where citizens, politicians were vehemently opposed. Just go to Boston 2024, the no Boston situation. But this throughout the board and in Europe, because you know what? It's an unknown and we cannot go behind the way it was done over the last few years until we see change. We're not going to get behind because while we live in a quote unquote I'm always careful when I use that phrase, but we're supposedly living a post-corruption era. Let the little doubter and skeptic in me still be allowed to breathe.
But Maddie had the better bid, so there you go.
Well, exactly. So that's going to be interesting to see if there's any countries willing to, outside of the big ones like we're seeing now, and even then, those bids doesn't necessarily have the public support behind them. Like, I remember, Duane, we always do this. We always, when we were kids, those games, that game, this time, that time. There was always a positive of, yes, we want, go for it. Even though we had bad experiences like Montreal, Quebec City really tried really damn hard to get them a few times. And it was important. Now it's always negative. It's always corruption. It's always doping doesn't help as well, but this is across the board in sports. But it's always corruption here. They don't respect their rights. It's a fake building in Sochi in the village to make it look better than it is. All those aspects, I'm tired of. Like, it doesn't help the publicity of Olympics to trying to get people support for the Olympics in different cities.
No, and look, you mentioned about that public perception and public support for these games. And look, we talk on this show, we talk about what I call soft benefits. And there are a lot of soft benefits to having a multi-sport event in your city. I think that it's where we get this bogged down is that people focus on the hard benefits and they oversell the hard benefits for years. And that has caused some bad press and some ill will with that. And makes it nearly a non-starter. I think about the city that I'm sitting in Toronto, which has been for 2 past Olympics and has failed to get them, obviously. And there was some talk, and I believe there's even some people in this city that on the business side, on the politician side, that ideally would love to bid again, but it's just a non-starter. Like, there was a bit of like rumbling about it immediately after the Pan Ams. There was a bit of Pan Am afterglow here because they went off pretty well, and I think a lot of people had more fun at them than they thought they would, and they were more successful than I think people thought they were. So
people are seeing the benefit with the infrastructures. Just look at the infrastructures of the Pan Am being used to this day in the majority and actually being helpful for the community. Let's not find 5 rings bingo card, the Milton Velodrome. There you go. Example. Concrete example, literally.
It would get literally concrete. Yeah. it benefits the athletes moving forward in the communities that they're in, obviously. But I think that that's going to be, if the Olympics don't figure out a way to make this more manageable for cities, and the ideas that we put out there before, we won't belabor them right now. If you listen to the show, you know them. It's like multi-city games, or using the same city back-to-back games or something like that. There's ways to do it, but it's of the Pan Ams. And when you think about it, and I take my Olympic boosterism off, I can understand that the logic of having the Pan Ams here, you get that infrastructure built. It's at a lower scale, cost less money. You still get the benefits. Well, why do you need the Olympics other than the big party and the sort of ego boost of it all after that? And that's kind of, I think, there's logic to that. So what do the Olympics have to figure it out? They have to figure out how to make this manageable. I go back to the idea that it's a TV event, have it in 4 different cities so that you're splitting it up a little bit. Hell, you could even make it smaller so that you're not, maybe you make the summer games every 2 years or something, and you half size them so that every sport is on a 4-year cycle. So that would be a little bit more manageable, but we'd also get more Olympics out of it. That'd be kind of fun. But there's got to be stuff, and they really do have to look at this, because, I could see a situation where no one bids for these damn things one day. Like, we're down to 2 cities in this thing. Are we going to have a non-bid? It's like the situation on Montreal got the Olympics in '76. There was really no one else in the bidding process then.
No, pretty much. And it was backdoor dealing. It'd be like, you know what? We can do it. Really? Okay, why not? I was like, if you go back to how Montreal got the Olympics, it's quite an interesting story. Here's another idea, Duane. There's a lot of great stories, but if you look at what the Olympics are supposed to be, like the best of the best to determine the best. So maybe we should raise the standard a little bit. Maybe there shouldn't be 500 sprinters and 20,000 rounds. I'm exaggerating, but just to cut cost, to make it more sustainable going forward. How about you have qualification events before going to Olympics to a different way that it's made now, where there's still a lot of people qualifying for different events, and you have finals, or you have 1 or 2, like, to make it even more streamlined, to maybe have the opportunity to smaller, that you don't need to build hotels for 10,000 people. That's what I'm saying. There's ways to cut in the fat. There's ways to put a Kaizen through this to still do what you want to do, which is the best in the best. Give them the platform they need to be the best. And that's what the Olympics are technically at the core, what it is. It's about competition. Yeah, it's about fairness. It's about all sportsmanship and all those great aspects, but the competition level. So, you know what? Even though the runner from Iran, it's a great story, but he finishes 5 minutes off the normal time, maybe he shouldn't be there.
Yeah, that's an old debate too with that, and they have actually reduced the amount of. There is still, provisions to let some of those folks get in, and you kind of be ashamed to lose it. But I get what you're saying. The other idea that I've heard bandied about, that I'm not crazy about, because I do like the idea of learning about a new city every 4 years or every 2 years, as the case may be, is to have a permanent site to, sort of all the federations chip in, and you put it someplace, and it's a pilgrimage to get there. Obviously Greece would be ideal if they had any money, but it wouldn't be there. It'd probably be Switzerland. Probably
but you know what happened last time we put the Olympics in Greece? 2 years later, they looked as old as the ruins of 2,000 years ago. So that's what happens.
There you go. So you make a modern day Olympia is basically what I'm saying. That is another idea that's out there.
And how about, here you go. How about Whistler for the Winter Olympics?
Well, I think Canada hosting the permanent Winter Games isn't that far-fetched. I mean, there is a bid in play for Calgary again. And that's the other thing, too, is I think you're going to see cities that previously hosted more likely to get back into the ring again because they have existing infrastructure. They just have to freshen up. That said, it's going to be a challenge for Calgary to win it because, Vancouver was so recent, and there's going to be resistance. They're trying to get an arena built there, and that's probably a big part of what that bid's about. So we'll see. It all comes down to money, though. And as we said, down to 2 cities bidding for the 2026 Summer Games or 2024 Summer Games. Pardon me. There's too many dates here. We get them mixed up between the soccer world and this.
Sometime in the future.
Yeah, sometime in the future. All right, that's going to be it for this show. We promise we won't take 6 months off again. We'll look to do this bi-weekly, I think. And we'll have this chats again. But Kevin, as always, he says goodbye to the show, so I'll say goodbye to y'all now.
You can follow Duane on Twitter at 24th Minute and myself at Kev Laramee. You can follow the show at 5 Rings Podcast, and you can find all the podcasts that we create here at the Sports Podcasting Network on sportspodcastingnetwork.com and everywhere: iTunes, FeedBurner, Podbay Player, Podbean, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, TuneIn Radio. You can find the Sports Podcasting Network and find all the shows under the SPN feed. And until next time on the Five Rings Podcast, well, sports. You were listening to SPN, the Sports Podcasting Network. Visit us, sportspodcastingnetwork.com. Own your podium. Been so long, I forgot how to say goodbye to that show.